Language. It's something we all use to communicate with one another. And with several languages around the world, communication becomes easier and easier as the world gets closer in the digital world. Language is also a multi-million-dollar industry.
A revolution is a fundamental and relatively sudden change in political power. An organization which occurs when the population revolts. This is the Marco Martins Revolution, powered by Vodcast TV. Visit vodcasttv.com for more.
Joining me today, Nicky Visentin is Silva. Thank you so much.
Hey.
She is the founder of the online language school, Fluent Panda Language School. So learning digitally online has become more and more prominent, specifically since the COVID pandemic. Nicky, thanks for joining me. And let's start off there. Your journey into education took a massive shift during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's start before that. Where did you start in terms of teaching people language?
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for having me. So from the time I was about 14, I had this extending dream that all I actually wanted to do was go and live in Japan. And basically every decision I made in my life was to get me there. There's this amazing program that the embassy offered, and I thought something that would put me ahead of the rest would be, number one, that I speak Japanese, and number two, that I went and studied teaching, which is actually my passion. So I fulfilled that dream. I got to go live in Japan. I got to speak Japanese and learn Japanese that way. And then when I came back home, back to South Africa, this is still about a year and a bit before the COVID-19 pandemic, I was like, wow, I really don't want to lose my Japanese ability. Obviously, working in schools here would be difficult. So I got into travel where I could work with Japanese clients. And we all know how the travel industry did once the COVID-19 pandemic hit. So that sort of led to me having to make some tough decisions.
So you moved to Japan. You teach English in Japan, obviously very passionate about Japan specifically, and that's what got you in that direction. You come back home, you've stopped teaching, you decide you're not going to carry on in education here in South Africa because you're not going to be teaching Japanese in South Africa. The demand would be too low compared to teaching English in Japan.
Sort of. It was more a case of I wanted to continue learning Japanese and using Japanese. And one of the things that I'm sure we'll get into as well is that it's difficult to learn a language when you're not immersed in the language. So I didn't want to have a situation where I was learning Japanese, just doing a 1 hour lesson a week or whatever, and that's what I was doing. I wanted to still be immersed. So
you wanted to use Japanese
correct.
In conversation every day?
Every day, correct. So that's sort of what made me transition. It wasn't that, at this point I still really loved teaching and all of that. It's just that I still wanted to continue my language journey.
So you come to South Africa and you decide that you're going to work in travel, so as in helping Japanese tourists come on holiday to South Africa specifically.
Correct. So we have the Japanese clients coming to South Africa, or also South Africans going to Japan, that sort of thing. So
you would speak to the hotel groups, the travel groups, make sure that how many people are South Africans are we? Okay, we need to get a bus company that can move this many people from their hotel to whatever. Site that they want to go see, some sort of tourist location in Japan. You need to be able to liaise with the bus company, the hotel, etc., in Japanese, so that the South African group can travel freely there.
Correct.
Now, of course, you're dealing with either Japanese travel agencies and groups, packages, or directly with Japanese travelers who want to come to South Africa, and you need to arrange all of their travel stuff there.
Yes.
Then the pandemic happens. No one travels anywhere.
Obviously, I can't besmirch the travel company I was working with. They were a great company, but naturally we had to all take salary cuts, etc. And unfortunately, it was just something I couldn't do. But
well, Thompson's Travel was the biggest travel agency on the planet and went under literally during the COVID-19 pandemic.
yeah,
I think they've re-emerged as a digital-only service now, but whereas they used to have retail stores everywhere, all across the UK, across South Africa. I mean, Thompson's Travel went under because of that pandemic. So smaller travel agencies, what's the expectation there? Like, travel agencies weren't making a lot of money pre the COVID pandemic. They weren't in their heyday. The market became very competitive. Their margins were much lower. To go 6, 9, 10, 12 months without any income at all would kill most businesses, let alone ones that were already under strain. So you're now in a position where you've had to take a salary cut from the agency that you're working for, and you decide you need to make a shift.
correct. And basically, it was a case of, okay, what skills do I have now that I can go into? You know, I was not working in South Africa with skills that weren't. Sure, I was still teaching, but you know, you're teaching English. It's a very different sort of curriculum teaching style than what schools here were teaching, who were also under strain. They were migrating online. Lots of brick and mortar schools were unsure. So I leaned back on my teaching degree and I was basically like, well, I have this Japanese skill. Let me just try it. Let me see if I can get anyone in. So almost overnight, I just said, made a little post and I said, hi, I'm going to be giving a free lesson on Japanese. Thereafter, it will be X amount for however many lessons, and I would love for you to join. And we got such a big interest from that. Lots of people joined. I was really, really lucky. And then out of nowhere, somebody, I had a client then ask, hey, do you, give German lessons? Do you give like French lessons? And I was like,
well, you don't.
Yeah, I was like, no, but because of like what I studied and the people I've met along the way, I know really good German speakers, French teachers, etc., etc. And because everybody's in this COVID sort of situation, I just sort of went, hey, would you be interested in, doing a few lessons? I know things are hard at the moment, so this is a nice way for you to bolster things up. And really, I can say I'm so lucky that it snowballed into what it did, because we started off just sort of doing these, hey, do you have this language? Do you have this language? In the beginning, it was crazy. Every week I was adding in like 3 or 4 new languages. And it was, in the beginning it was simpler when I knew people, I knew who spoke those languages. I knew people of that descent who could put me in touch with qualified people. We did even get like really rare requests for like Ukrainian and things like that. It was quite interesting. And yeah, during that pretty much launched the whole thing. Then I sat down with my now husband and I was like, no, let's talk about like, what should we name it? What should we do? All of these things.
So you purely start on a demand basis. So the demand increases, people have time on their hands. They want to upskill themselves during a time digitally because they're sitting at home doing nothing. So the demand peaks for learning languages. You're like, I need to make money anyway, so I need to jump on this and I'm going to teach directly. But now I'm getting all these requests for various languages. So now all of a sudden I can't do this alone. So I need to find other people who can help me. And it's like right now, today, clearly there's now a need for a business, a formal business to be created for
Correct.
this. You speak to your now husband and you're like, we need to name this. We need to start this. So you start with the name, which is the funny part because there's so much to building a business.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do we name this? That's the first thing. And you brainstorm this name and you come up with Fluent Panda, which I think is great. Inspired by your Japanese connection. Obviously, pandas are perhaps more Chinese. I don't know.
Yeah, I absolutely love pandas. And, I actually wanted an alliteration. I knew I wanted the word panda in it because I wanted to have like a really cute logo. And we had gotten onto, I had really gotten onto Polyglot Panda. And I had like said, oh, we should, maybe I'll call it Polyglot Panda. And, the more people I bounced it off of, they were like, Polyglot. They were like, yeah, Polyglot Panda. They were like,
what's polyglot?
Yeah, exactly. So a polyglot is basically a person who has lots of interest in languages and speaks lots of languages, those sort of things. Yeah. So like,
no one knows that.
So that was a lot of things. So then basically it was workshop to maybe just Fluent Panda, and that like sort of just was like, oh, Fluent Panda. I like the sound of that. I like all of that. And yeah, it's really like it's so weird because you don't get taught about business studies in schools, really. You don't get taught these sort of skills. You know, most people, we go into this and we're like, okay, you're going to go to school. You've got to get really good marks. If you want to go into medicine, you better be amazing in everything. And then your life is to go study medicine, become a doctor. That's it. Or study finance, go into accounting. That's it. Or become a CA, whatever the case is. And nobody really tells you about like, oh, what happens if I want to do my own thing? So on one hand, it's really exciting. You learn a lot. And in the beginning, everything is like fresh and new and all of that. And on the other hand, then it gets to a point where you're like, whoa, I've actually made something. It's making something. How do I now keep this like this? How do I keep people like, oh, hey, please continue supporting us because, you know, we've made something. And now you also have people that are relying on you almost. They're like getting an income from this themselves and stuff. So you're like, there's a whole bunch of different things that come in. And it's really almost like,
so you were completely blind to the business elements.
Completely.
From an entrepreneurial standpoint, you were like, oh, okay, I need to come up with a name because I know how to do the physical work.
correct.
And I've now been able to source the other people who can do the other physical work gaps that I can't do. But now there's a business element that you are completely blind to and you need to learn from the ground up. So you're not getting funded by anyone. You're not getting any. You're not asking for any investment capital. So you don't need to draw up a business plan for anyone. You're not getting a loan. So you need to start somewhere. So a website. Things like that.
Yep.
Having some sort of established websites, but then you've got accounts and tax as well. So you now I need to go to the bank. I need to register this. Do I register the company first? Do I just get a bank account on my personal capacity? What do I do? How do you learn all of this? Where do you go? Where do you get all the information?
So Google is a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
I was also lucky that, again, my husband had, when he was doing his tertiary education, had done a BCom. So he had a sort of like, at least a, book way of what to do. And then that's basically how we started. We got the name. We were like, right, we need a social media presence at the very least. At least that's free. Because again, we don't have any starting capital here. I was very lucky that I had my own laptop and I had stable internet connection and everything else. I'm quite good with technology, I feel, so I could at least figure that part out. He was then like, no, we need to register the business. You do that through SIP-C. I was like, oh my gosh, what is that now? So you go online, you go SIP-C. At least the process for me was pretty simple to follow. You could do that. You open your bank account. Everything is fine.
The hardest part about registering a business with something like SIP-C directly is just the anxiety of thinking that there's a lot to do. But they actually make it very straightforward. So you just simply go to the website, you say register, you register an account,
Correct.
and then they will allow you to register a name that's available for your business.
Correct.
You put in all of your details and they will allow you to open the business as long as your tax is up to date. You won't be flagged for anything. They'll require some FICA documentation from you to prove your physical address, a phone number that works, and an email address. Those are the things that they need from you. You don't need an accountant to do it for you. You don't need to hire a company to do it for you. You can literally go to the website yourself. As long as you've got a South African ID number, you can register a business on your name.
Yeah.
As long as also there isn't another business on your name, because that requires other tax clearances. But to open your first business on your own name, it's simply one website. I'll link it in the description below. And you go there, you register your business. It costs you very little. Very little. Very, very little. And you pay a renewal fee every year.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah. And really it was that simple. I remember seeing online at the time a whole bunch of people being like, I want help registering my business, and people, like you say, charging thousands.
Yeah.
And I remember doing this at one point and being like, did I do something wrong? Because literally it was a case of SIP-C, you go there and you follow the instructions, and it's all done thereafter. And I will say that
it's even harder to do it through someone because you have to send them all the documentation and then they have to ask you for which one's missing.
Correct. And I would also say that it just almost gives that legitimacy, because what SIP-C does is it gives your clients or your consumers just sort of security that you are an actual business. Because you get once you've got those documents, you get all the COR sort of documents, which are very important. It's got your company registration number, which the minute people see that, they feel a lot more secure in like, oh, okay, I know this company, which as a small business is really difficult to like get people
some sort of validity.
Some sort of trust that, okay, this company isn't just going to take, especially when we're just all online, there's no person face to face with you. So so we started with the SIPC, we got that under all done.
Your social media accounts.
We spent a lot of time on Canva making our little logos and things like that.
Which is another free service.
Mm-hmm. There is a paid for one. I personally haven't felt the need to use it.
It's for very specific design requirements, etc. But the free service is really great for basic entrepreneurial stuff. And you'll probably never, unless you're some sort of designer, you'll never need the paid service from Canva.
Exactly. And so we made our sort of our look, what we wanted. We used another free service, which was Wix, which at least in the beginning is free if you want to like do your domain and things, which still, at the time, luckily we had already started giving lessons. So it wasn't.
You've got some income.
Yeah, we had some, and it was a good thing to put towards.
It's not like paying a designer to a web developer who takes an upfront fee of quite a substantial one to things. So like services like Wix or Squarespace, etc., or website builders, you really don't need more, and it costs you a fairly low fee every month rather than paying 10, 20, 30,000 Rand to a web developer up front, which can be difficult for a startup business.
Seriously difficult. And again, it's crazy for me when I sit back and think about this, but genuinely, I put zero of my own money into this business. It was all self-funding. It might have been I think it was 150 Rand for SIPC. I think that was it. From there on out, the company and the way the model is that basically the company will grow as much as our students are here. So as long as we have students, we have the capacity to grow or pay for things. There will never be a case where it's like, whoa, we're worried about this failing and we can't afford this or whatever. So
you managed to build a company with very low overheads because you had these existing expenses already in terms of your daily life, right?
Exactly.
Just internet and a computer, you had that. And that's your main cost. And then it's literally your labor that's you charge sort of per hour of your work, really.
Correct.
So you were self-employed more so than a business, but then the business starts to grow, you start bringing in other people, and now it's starting to look more and more like a business at this point.
Exactly. And I would say that, after we had set up all of those things, which really take up the bulk of your time, that is really hard to think of how you want to do it. Then the fun started. It was really exciting to like start, we would have a whole bunch of trial lessons where it would be for different languages, and it would be a teacher, and we would have like 20, 30 people in this class that were all so keen to start learning a new language or new one. And then like I even did the stats, and we have a 96% retention rate of students that have even been with us since that first year in COVID. They've just continued their language journey because it's just been so enjoyable and so relaxed. You're learning from the comfort of your home or wherever you are. We're all busy people now. Petrol's expensive. You don't want to drive up and down. And I think something that happened before was we've always had the opportunity to learn foreign languages here. I think people think that it's rare. It's not so much that it's rare. It's just that you might, for example, want to learn, I don't know, Mandarin. And in your immediate vicinity, there are no Mandarin teachers. You would have to find someone, and they would either be really far where you'd be like, holy crap, how can I make this work in a schedule? Or, completely in a different province or something like that.
And available before 6 p.m. while you're at work.
Or whatever the case is. So that's where ours sort of like clicked in there, where people were like, hang on, we can just learn online and then I don't have to worry. So that's why we also have like quite a few rare languages like Croatian. I have quite a few teachers that actually live overseas because I struggled to source them here.
Of course.
So like my Thai teacher, she lives in Thailand. She does her lessons from Thailand.
But she's fluent in English and she teaches Thai to English speakers.
Exactly.
Okay. So you built this network of employees really, but they're freelancers, am I correct? I mean,
they're more like contractors.
They're contractors, right? So they freelance independent contractors. You pay them per usage. So they've got 3 students under their belt, under your library. They get paid their fee, which you determine the fee, obviously, so that it's consistent across your network, so that you're not having like, to learn German costs this much more than to learn Croatian. And if you can't find a teacher that works within that fee structure, that is not a feasible language for your network, right? So this is how you're really building a business.
Correct.
Is you're using these freelance contractors. You set a rate that they're going to be paid in an international standard fee, right? So it's like USD, whatever that you're paying them in. Are you charging in USD or a South African service that's charging in dollars? You're charging in rands, no matter the language.
No matter the language, we charge in rands. There have been exceptions because we've actually grown quite an international sort of student. Yeah. So, for them it's quite difficult, and we've opened up things like PayPal. But for example, PayPal will only accept USD, or like the students in Japan, they use Japanese yen. But then what I basically do is whenever it's time to invoice, we go, hey, this is the rate for today. It needs to be paid by this time.
Okay. So the hardest part, and something you probably haven't come across yet, is actually paying your international suppliers, right?
No, I've come across it. I've had to do it.
Have you come across it so far? So it's like where, oh goodness, we only received this much in rands. That's now less than what you were used to getting in your currency.
So look, I mean, with the international teachers that I have, right? I'm going to use the word employee, but we won't use it just so that it's easier to converse than doing. So my international teachers, I have 3, and all of them, you learn how to again, it's another thing that you learn, and it's something that you speak to them. I say, up front before we sign, I say, look, number one, I understand that you are in Europe. I understand that in Europe, this is a lot more expensive, or whatever the case is. But this is what we will charge. Roughly, this is what you will get. And generally, they're actually really good with that. I employ passionate people. It's sure they're doing it to make some extra income, but it's also a passion for them. So it's built on trust over years. It's built on, sometimes they get a bit more, but less. And at the end of the day, I'm giving them a client base that they usually wouldn't have access to.
Right.
And it's more than enough for them to say, this is worth my time.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, small pain points, like you say, you overcome those little hurdles, but now you've built a business that's really competing with very large players in the space. So you've had to remain in a very niche way. So, for example, you might imagine that you were competing with the local Mandarin teacher in Johannesburg that you were competing with initially. However, that's not your main competition, is it? You're now an online school, so you're competing with Duolingo and Babbel.
Correct.
How have you been able to differentiate from those massive corporations who are using digital tools and have access to a market at an extremely low price for people who want to learn?
So it's a really good question, and it's something that we battle with. At the end of the day, we are still considered, we're not at the the sort of corporate size of a Duolingo or a Babbel. I mean that's okay. I can say that.
Yes, it's not part of your business plan. It's not part of
not at all.
And it's not feasible to go there. They're also a completely different way of teaching language, right?
Correct.
So that's where you've had to differentiate.
Correct.
Right.
And our sort of model has been, Duolingo, it's sort of you download the Duolingo app and you're playing games and you're doing rote learning to hopefully pick up some words in a language, which people buy into because it's free. I don't actually know anybody who's gone through Duolingo and has come out of it and said, I'm fluent in this language now. That's really not what they're doing. That's why they can have those low ones. What we're telling people is, hey, if you study with us, we're going to help you achieve your language dreams. So 9 times out of 10, people want to learn a language for fun, but no one's learning a language for fun to not use it. The fun of learning a language is that you actually want to use it. And that's where we're coming in and differentiating. We're saying, we're going to give you a personalized experience. You're going to come to us and you might have a dream of doing your chiropractic business in Amsterdam, which is very popular. You can do your Dutch course with us. We will help you. And we will give you a certificate once you've completed it that we've actually helped people at the embassy get their visa to actually go to Amsterdam and do that. So that's sort of where we are. We are saying we are going to teach you the language so that you can actually use it and practically.
Okay, so I have 2 questions from that. Number one, I'll first like to just break down from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is that Duolingo, Babbel, these very large corporate digital services are on a volume model, and they're able to supply people at a massive, massive volume because they've got the tools to do that. AI-driven lesson plans that are completely digital, massive servers, and they cater towards a very large audience around the planet. Then what you're working in is a more niche business model is that you're dealing with a very much smaller group of people who are more serious and prepared to spend more than the very low cost of the volume model, because they're getting access to real teachers, one-on-one time, one-on-one lesson plans, and then things like a certificate at the end of the day that can help them immigrate to a country.
Correct. Help them immigrate, or in the case of students, something that has become very popular is I don't know if you've heard of it, is like, for example, the Cambridge exams. Those are pretty much internationally standardized exams where you can focus on things like French, German, Mandarin, isiZulu, Afrikaans. Those are there, but they're at a much higher standard. And it's almost, I don't want to say unregulated, but it's anybody can go and write those exams, right? You just have to be at a certain level to be able to pass them. So yes, on one hand, especially with the kids, we start kids from young to prepare them for their IG or A's level exams. And that, as soon as you've got kids passing that, then you've got legitimacy again. Then people are like, whoa, this company is able to help my kids do that. And I no longer have to worry about trying to find a qualified IG or A's level teacher in my city, in my town, or whatever. This company, we have, for example, we have a lot of Angolan students who study Portuguese through us for their IG and A's level, because even though Angolan is a Portuguese country, to find those sort of teachers is very, very difficult and demanding.
So you've got an issue of certification where, do all of your teachers require certification, or did you do the very clever thing of just getting people prepared and then helping them to write certified exams? And then those examination boards, so just like, listen, this is where you go and do your exam. We'll prepare you adequately for that exam. If you pass that test, your certification comes from that examiner. So they're the ones that have had to go out and get the regulated certification. You're just teaching.
Correct.
Right.
So, and I will say that it's not that my teachers are underqualified. They definitely are, especially in the case where we also have evolved to the point that we provide first additional languages to schools. So usually online schools, but we've also got some brick and mortar schools who take the courses online, right? I can't put in an unqualified teacher into those schools to teach.
But you've not had to go seek out your own certifications for the business.
Correct.
So that's been very clever, is that you've used third-party suppliers for certification on every level.
Correct.
So you've not had to deal with regulatory issues in your business through a sort of loophole in a way, is that all your suppliers have the necessary, you only hire your third-party contractors or your suppliers who have the certifications in place when required, and that helps you bypass the need for regulation in your business.
Correct.
Which anybody knows who works, especially in the digital space, how difficult regulation is as a barrier to entry into a market.
And expensive.
Very expensive.
They are very, very expensive. So that's why we do it this way.
Away from the business side of things, I'd like to dig deeper into language. And there's something very prominent that we see globally, is a difficulty for English first language speakers to pick up a second language. I have an idea of where I think that may lie as to why English first language speakers don't pick up a second language as easily as people who are non-English speaking for their first language. They tend to pick up a second language, mostly English, far quicker. Is it necessity? Is it phonetics? What is it that makes people who speak English alone struggle to pick up a second language?
It's a good question. It's one we often get. And look, there's I think it's many different reasons, but I think the main reason is that we live in an English world. Wherever you go in this world as an English speaker, even if you're going to a country that is not English speaking, most likely if you were to, converse in English, they'll be able to at least communicate with you to get you around. And what I have found through my own language journey and through other people, the best way to learn a language is immersion. When you are forced to use a language you can't rely on, that is where your learning comes in, and that is what makes you grow in learning a language. So, I remember even when I did my TESOL, my teaching English to students of other languages, one of the things they said was, even if you speak the students' target language, their home language. So, for example, when I was in Japan, even if I was able to speak Japanese, you shouldn't let your student know that you can speak Japanese, because it becomes sort of a crutch. you then fall out of the habit of saying, okay, I'm now in English. This person doesn't understand what I'm going to say. I have to try whatever way necessary, whether it's drawing a picture, saying what I need to communicate that way. And that is where learning really, really happens. So it's very difficult because, in my opinion, the best way to learn a language is submerge yourself in that culture. Go to Spain, live in Spain for a year and a bit, and
goodness, this
force
is going to be
yourself.
the only way I learn Italian is if I go move to Italy.
Move to Italy, learn Italian that way. And that's why we have such a, our teachers especially, we understand that in class, when you're going to go to that 1 hour or 2 hour lesson or whatever the case is, that's probably going to be your only chance to speak that language that you're trying to learn. And that's where learning happens. It's when you're forcing yourself. So I often tell people, when people say, oh, how do I practice more? Netflix is a great resource. Go to Netflix. Don't watch it with subtitles.
Subtitles off.
Subtitles off. It's a crutch. Unless you want to watch it with your Spanish subtitles on or whatever the case is.
Helps.
To practice. Yeah.
Right, because then you can visualize the language as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
But you need to listen to music in your target language. Find an artist you like in that target language. The more in your daily life that you can stop using English and start hearing, listening, even if it's just listening, because then your ear becomes attuned to it. You start picking up words, etc. Get a pen pal that speaks only that language and struggle your way through language. Really becomes, that is what it is at the end of the day. And you need to struggle through it to learn through it, if that makes sense.
I have one note on that, Matt, is that I think you're making a lot of this audience feel like they've got an opportunity to learn a language easy by watching Netflix and listening to music. I tried that. It comes with, that makes up 5% of what it is. It comes with a lot of hard work because otherwise it's just words on a show.
100%.
So if you're not doing your lessons and your homework and all of those things as well, that is useless. But it's helpful once you've done the other 90% of the hard work of the actual lessons.
Yeah, exactly. You need to be
because I've tried
studying.
that. I'll be honest.
No.
I've got a lot of Italian music and Italian TV shows, and I just don't know what's going on because I haven't done the actual work.
No. You need, what I mean is supplementary to your lessons, right? So it's got to be a supplement. So I'm so sorry. Yeah. Once you're going to learn a topic, say on directions or something, or you're going to learn your words or whatever. But 1 hour a week is not enough. We often get students who, they will do one lesson a week or maybe once every 2 weeks or whatever. And they will get sort of stuck in the same place. And it's because, I learned this study when I was doing psychology. Your brain, when we're children, the reason you'll find kids that are so bilingual, trilingual, all of that is because they really are sponges. Their brains are malleable enough to make those connections, to learn all those languages and to make compartments in your brain to say, oh, hey, I need to know all this. So I've made these specific spaces. When you and I grow up, eventually your brain stops becoming so malleable. So now you've got English. That is your whole language section of your brain. You're trying to introduce French into it, right? Your brain goes, whoa, I don't have more space to make a new compartment. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start chipping away at your English and make space there. And that's going to be French. And you'll actually see, sometimes I struggle with myself. I'll be thinking of a word in English. And for the life of me, I'm like, what the heck is this word in English? I'll remember it in Japanese or whatever the case is. And it's because our brains, unfortunately, aren't as malleable when we're adults. So it is possible, but it requires effort. And you're going to have to want to continue to absorb everything from there.
And the important point of what you're saying there is that you can chip away from your English and create a little bit of French, Spanish, Italian, Japanese, whatever language you're trying to learn. You will chip away at a bit of your English. But that English is such a big, prominent part of your brain that if you don't use the French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, whatever, that English will chip away at that language so quickly that it just disappears in a moment. So because English is such a major priority in your brain that when you learn little bit by little bit, it's so difficult to fight against the English. The English is fighting back against the other language in your brain in such a ruthless way. So you really need to put a lot of time and effort into your second language to learn it.
So I often tell, we have a lot of kids, and parents will ask me, how do I get my kids to do this? And I think you can see it in lots of different cultures. I mean, I feel like if we look at all of our 11 official languages, whichever culture those kids come from, usually those kids come up being really bilingual. Or if you look at, Greek culture, where Greek is spoken in the house pretty much as a first language. And what I always tell parents is if you're able to, you should actually always speak to your kids in your home language, whether that be Italian, whatever, because English they're going to learn. They're going to be surrounded by English by the time they enter school, by the time they interact with other people other than their family, etc., etc. So if you want to get your kids to be bilingual from a young age, don't speak to them in English. Speak to them in whatever language is not going to be common in your area. So if you move to Italy, you should speak to your kids in English because they're going to learn Italian the minute they step out into the world. They will be bombarded with it.
I think it's good advice. I think it's just should come with a little bit of caution, is that if you want the mental well-being of your child to be prioritized, right? If you're going to speak Afrikaans at home and they're going to go to an English school, just be aware that they need a very good balance of English because they don't want to go to school and feel inferior in the language to other kids.
I don't know if, it could be a good point. I don't want to take away from the point. I just think that from what I've seen out there, kids generally don't let language be as much of a thing as we do. I mean, if you look at kids, they're playing, they're doing whatever. Communication doesn't really need to be key. It's we're throwing this ball or whatever. And I think they're generally a lot more forgiving and a lot more like willing to try and help.
So we're talking very early stages.
No, I'm talking like from the time they get to like grade 0, grade 0.
Okay. They need to be speaking their home language and then they'll learn English at school.
Yeah, and I will say if you're, your if mom and dad are speaking Spanish every day or whatever the case is, probably by the time they're even interacting with cousins are speaking English to them. The cousins aren't speaking Spanish to them. I think there are probably very few households, at least from a foreign languages perspective, that is speaking all Spanish to that child. You'll probably see they're speaking multiple. And really, it's the best way to learn a language is as a child. They are sponges. I've seen it with, my nephews. So my sister-in-law is Greek, my brother is Italian, and obviously they've got a son, and he can count in Greek, Italian, and English, all in those languages, and he's 3-4 years old.
Greek is the craziest one of the lot. Those letters all over the place. So I don't know how they're going to learn that one. So my next task is, the simplest one is to invent time travel. Go back to my parents and tell them to speak to me in Portuguese when I was a little kid. Nicky, anything else to add? I'd love to give you this opportunity to tell people how to find you, how to find Fluent Panda, how to get started, any advice for what research they need to do before they commit to what language they want to learn.
So you can find us pretty much all the way online. We have a new website, www.fluentpanda.online. We've actually also released something, for more busy people, which are our self-study courses. So instead of sitting in a live lesson, we've got recorded lessons that you pay. You can work through it in your own time.
For people who have discipline.
Or as an additional study supplement. Like if you're already studying something, you're doing live lessons with us, it's also a good way to continue that reinforcement. Feel free to literally contact us through any of our social medias, through the website, all of that. And I just want to tell people that, don't be hard on yourselves when you're learning a language. And the most common thing we get is that people are shy to talk. Don't be. 9 times out of 10, the person you're trying to communicate to is so happy that you're trying to communicate with them in that language that they are more than happy to hear you. Nobody's going to laugh at you. Nobody's going to make fun of you. And it's the best way to learn is just really put yourself out there, practice those languages, and it will come to you.
Well, people laugh at my Afrikaans, but that is rightfully so. Nicky, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an episode of the Marco Martins Revolution. Be sure to visit vodcasttv.com/revolution now if you'd like a discount on your first order of a podcast or podcast series. For me, for now, it's goodbye.